Well,
He's like, I've never been a supporter of the Ukraine. Why are you asking me that?
last thing, President Trump reiterated.
Let's get started on Ukraine. Donald Trump coming in hot and doing things about Ukraine that European leaders feel sidestepped on, seemingly.
On Russian television, they could scarcely contain their glee.
Quebec.
Against the backdrop of an American prisoner released from a Moscow jail this week, the anchorwoman asks, has Russia been promised Kyiv or Odessa? President Trump, she says, has an excellent friendship with President Putin. And what about the
Northern Line is not acknowledging your comments. Disrespect is real. He can disrespect me if he wants. I still love him.
Ukrainian president visiting a proposed nuclear power plant? President Trump called him after speaking to President Putin last night.
It's important that everything does not go according to Putin's plan. He wants to make all his negotiations bilateral between him and the United States, but we, as a sovereign country, simply will not be able to accept any agreements taken without us.
But this was Trump on Ukraine a few days ago.
Like, the difference between Trump and Joe Biden or any Democratic leadership is that a Democrat will never openly say the truth. They'll never say Ukrainian autonomy is insignificant in this process. They will, as a matter of fact, consistently say we are behaving in the interests of our incredibly important allies. But the reality of the matter is, what Trump is saying. It doesn't matter what the Democrats say. What matters is what the Democrats do. Just like it doesn't matter what Trump says. What matters is what Trump does. Okay? So while Democrats will maintain the aesthetics and maintain civility, yes, of course, they also did not listen to the demands made by Zelensky on numerous occasions. Zelensky kept asking for more weapons. Zelensky kept asking for different kinds of weapons, air support. Zelensky wanted to do a flight-free, they wanted to create a security zone above Ukrainian airspace. Okay, they wanted to do a no-fly zone. This would require American and NATO forces to constantly fly over the area and blow up Russian flights, blow up Russian air cover. Okay, this would have been This would have obviously been a hot war between nuclear powers, NATO nations, the United States of America, and Russia. They never did that. Okay, Biden gave billions to Ukraine. What the F are you talking about? My point is, regardless of what Ukraine's demands were, no matter how moral or how just, so giving Ukraine to Putin is the same as not supplying every request by Zelensky. What the F is this take? Okay, you are failing to comprehend the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that Ukrainian interests in this process, I'm gonna walk through this slowly but surely. Okay, there were plenty of needs that Ukraine had after the invasion. Okay, the Democratic administration did not abide by all of those needs. The Democratic administration did not turn around and give everything that Zelensky asked to Ukraine. Okay? They never would turn around and be like, Zelensky doesn't order us, we order him. They would never say the truth of the matter. Okay? And some of you, I think, were you fell for this consent being manufactured. You fell for this idea that like the Democrats actually did care about all of the emancipatory needs of Ukraine, and that it was actually a moral interest that America had. It was not. And I kept repeating this over and over again. Okay? Donald Trump turning around and saying the quiet part out loud does not change the dynamic. Okay? That's it. Fell for it again, award back-to-back champion. Yeah. You should remain neutral in politics, Hasan. Thank you.
You know, they may make a deal, they may not make a deal, they may be Russian someday, or they may not be Russian someday.
The new US Defense Secretary at NATO today may not aim to have Ukraine as...
This is the difference between Donald Trump also undermining U.S. aid. Okay, yeah, I should stay neutral like Asmongold. I should stay neutral in politics like Asmongold. Which would require me to just watch Donald Trump and go, yeah, that's pretty based. Yeah. Anyway, you should just tell people you are a centrist while holding all the same views. Yeah, I am. I'm a centrist. I'm a neutralist. I'm just objective. But something that a lot of people fail to consider here is that the situation in Ukraine is not, at this stage, the situation in Ukraine and what will happen in Ukraine is dictated by the terms of the battlefield. Okay? As in, there's two different options here. Will Ukrainian will Ukrainians living outside of Ukraine right now, Ukrainian men living outside of Ukraine right now, be forcibly deported back to Ukraine in order to be conscripted into the military and basically reinvigorate the Ukrainian defense forces because they need manpower more than anything else? Or will there be a land swap agreement, an inevitable end or an inevitable cessation of hostilities? Okay, you can criticize the Democratic Party without also blaming all of Trump's ridiculous things on them as well. I'm not blaming what Trump is saying right now. This is not even a criticism of the Democratic Party. This is a criticism of American foreign policy. Okay? You don't believe the weapons and billions from the U.S. government had a significant effect on Ukraine defending itself from invasion? No, of course it did. It probably stopped. It definitely stopped Vladimir Putin from taking Kyiv, okay? 100%. It played a pretty major role, especially in the interim from 2014 onward, where Ukraine was able to build a standing military, played a very significant role in them stopping Russia's offensive campaign. I think it definitely played a role. Having said that, however, after that fact, there was one instance where they talked in Antalya on a 15-point plan that fell apart, and ever since then, Russia has been able to take more and more space in eastern Ukraine, move up eastern Ukrainian positions, annex key parts of eastern Ukraine in sham symbolic annexations and ridiculous elections that they're holding, okay? While simultaneously destroying Ukrainian farmland, mining the shit out of eastern Ukraine, and hardening their positions. I thought you were pro-Russia. No, I'm not pro-Russia. Why would you think I'm pro-Russia? I've never been pro-Russia. Please stop relying on drama content creators who have no understanding of politics whatsoever. Okay? Jesus Christ. I can't believe we're 3 years into this. And people still come in here and they go, oh my God, I can't believe Hasan is not pro-Russia. That's so shocking to me. I thought he was. How hard is this position hardened by a democracy today and what? Find out. Side of black pill to go. I don't know what you're saying. Okay. You're a communist? Potato? Yeah, exactly. Because of my communist background, I am, of course, in support of the communist kleptocracy that is modern Russia. certainly a communist country, certainly a socialist country, led by the Marxist-Leninist Vladimir Putin. Famous communist. Anyway, I don't think that there is a tremendous difference. I don't think there is a gigantic difference between what any administration would do in this process. The only difference here is that Donald Trump will, again, say the quiet part out loud and defend it, even though it is indefensible. But that is because American foreign policy is often indefensible. The aesthetic differences are identical to the U.S. aid gutting. Okay? Now, Donald Trump says he's going to completely undermine U.S. aid. In which case, is he actually going to stop clandestine operations overseas or stop sending aid to other countries? Yes, he will most likely stop key aspects of aid going into other countries. But in reality, they are most likely going to centralize U.S. aid and still continue U.S. aid style operations. It's just that America is responding to its standing around the world changing, okay? As the global hegemonic superpower, as the cop, as the universal police force of the planet, America has lost a lot of soft power capabilities, and Donald Trump is accelerating that change to all hard power, all military, all stick, no carrot. That's it. Okay? I think this is a genuinely dangerous change. Can you explain what soft power versus hard power means? Yes, soft power is when you do nice things for other countries and therefore garner goodwill. I'll give you an example from China. China sending Sinovac to the Philippines is an example of soft power. Okay? Soft power works hand in hand with American military might and American military capabilities. Okay? It's the carrot versus the stick. The carrot plays a pretty big role because it causes, or at least it creates an environment where 800 military bases all around the world in foreign countries is not seen as 800 separate American military invasions, but rather a security cooperation and a security partnership. The Ukraine-Russia line has mostly been fixed since 2022 to 2023. Russia gained 4,000 square kilometers of territory in 2024, which was largely meaningless, so it's currently a stalemate at enormous cost to both sides, of course. Russia gained 4,000 square kilometers of Ukraine in 2024. How many soldiers did it lose? Verifying casualty figures for soldiers in Russia-Ukraine war is difficult, as experts call it a war of narratives. But it's clear Russia has lost more troops than in any war since World War II. Yeah, it is endlessly costly for Russia to consistently engage in permanent war in Ukraine. And it is, of course, also endlessly costly for Ukraine. The problem between Russia and Ukraine is that while Ukraine is backed by the entirety of the Western world, they simply have less people. No, they're not saying that they've lost close to the same number of troops in World War II. They're not saying that. They're just simply saying that the number of casualties on the Russian side are ginormous, more than any other country since World War II. World War II was like 20 million people. That's obviously it's nowhere near that. Okay. Doge is already dismantling the NED. This is good for the global south as a whole. We do not want your color revolution, says Top G. Yeah. Once again, I think the difference between what America will do in the future versus what America has done for the past almost century is that they just won't try to masquerade what they're doing as like a good thing. Okay, a thing that everybody wanted. Only when you witness the unstoppable march of 1.4 billion patriotic volunteers will you finally wake up from the pitiful stupor forced upon you by living in the imperial core. But a fake socialist like you will never visit China. You will remain an ostrich with his very small head buried in the sand. First of all, don't threaten me with a good time, okay? Don't threaten me with a very, even though you are, making fun of my head size, which is something outside of my control and only a consequence of my very broad shoulders, which I believe in most Asian countries is seen as a positive anyway. Don't know if it's the same in China as well. Okay. But all you are doing is highlighting that I will benefit from the Chinese century of prosperity. Okay. That's all you're saying. Anyway, if given the chance, would you visit China? I really want to. I want to visit China this year. Not exactly sure when I would do it, but I do want to do it. That is a certainty. You're a smart guard. Do you really think Kamala would have pushed for a ceasefire in Ukraine? Biden's deal was muscular liberalism, and Kamala was about preserving his legacy. I think muscular liberalism aside, the only thing that would be different is the aesthetics and how it is presented. Because once again, and I repeat this position over and over again, and I think I will have to repeat it over and over again, the only difference would be how it is packaged. Because the situation in Ukraine is not dictated by simply just like American interests or Russian interests. It is more so dictated by the terms of the battlefield. And if Ukraine is simply running out of manpower, as I've reported over and over again over the course of the past couple of months, and as the appetite towards more war is waning, regardless of the moral position that many Ukrainians maintain in emancipation from Russian invasion, okay? At the end of the day, there's a desperation that sets in when you simply don't have enough manpower. So unless you send in American mercenaries or something by the tens of thousands beyond the Foreign Legion, okay, and try to change the dynamic of this, battle with no severe Russian response, no like nuclear Russian response or whatever. Running out of manpower is such an AI way to say such a grim thing. Yes, running out of manpower means Ukrainians are dying. Okay, that's it. That's what that means. I think the reason the U.S. is letting go of its soft power is because U.S. is now unable to use access to the dollar and Western markets to control governments. China is a far better market and they do better deals. Washington knows it's not the global hegemon. I'm afraid they will try to start a world war to stop China's growth. They just know trading isn't working anymore. Where is the sentiment that Ukraine is lost, though? I mean, this is not a sentiment. This is just a grim but realistic analysis of what the situation looks like in terms of Ukrainian manpower. That's why I keep repeating that there are millions of Ukrainian men that no longer live in Ukraine that got refugee status in the West. What do you do in that situation? Do you forcibly extract them and then force them back to go and pick up arms against Russia? Do you deport Ukrainian men from all of the Western nations that they went to, okay, and then force them to serve in the Ukrainian defense forces? Because that's the only way at this point. That or conscription for all Ukrainian men down to the age of 18 is the only way that you can maintain this this posture, this defensive posture. Or do you tell Ukraine that it's basically over? Russia, being this despotic, authoritarian nation that it is, and being significantly larger than Ukraine, has the capacity to keep pushing men to the front lines in a way that Ukraine can't keep up. That's it. Russia just has more people. At the end of the day, wars are fought on the boundaries of attrition, and Russia has more manpower to lose. They're not even using their own people. They're using North Koreans. No, I think that's more so aesthetic partnership with North Korea, saying like North Korea also has a say in this, or North Korea also is involved in this. Are they using North Koreans? Yes. Is it partially because they've run out a lot of manpower? Certainly, but it's not like a game changer for Russia at all, I think. Anyway, honestly, Ukraine has to convert into an attrition, anti-occupation, guerrilla war. Open field wars will always be in Russia's favor. Give them territory, then give them hell. I mean, as a Ukrainian, I can confirm your point that Ukraine has no more men, but from here to say that Ukraine has lost, it seems to me a somewhat pessimistic vision. However, the Ukrainians will not give in to Russia's demands if they do not at least concede something to Ukraine. I think the general feeling is better to all die than to surrender. In terms of loss overall, I think that both sides have lost a lot in this process, for sure. Like Ukraine has had, I guess, somewhat of a Pyrrhic victory, in terms of being able to stop the Russian forces. And there's a tremendous number of Russian combatants that have been slaughtered in the process as well. The problem there is, when one side just has less people, what are you supposed to do? Is there actually any proof that there are DPRK soldiers in Ukraine? All I've seen are articles citing the Ukrainian and South Korean intelligence. I think that even the Russian side has admitted to using, or like all the reporting says that they're using it inside of Russian territory. In terms of like internal defense in Kursk and whatnot. Some of it is like the Asian Russians, which exist, but they have captured some DPRK forces, from what I understand. I don't know if they're in the front lines on Ukrainian territory, but I've seen some videos even on Russian hospitals about like Russian combatants in hospital chilling with the what they claim are North Koreans. But then again, as this Al Jazeera article shows, it is a war of narratives. Not that it ultimately matters, because once again, it's not like a significant difference maker. It's more like, I would go so far as to say that getting artillery shells from DPRK for Russia was more significant in this conflict than the actual troops. Because I think a lot of people on the pro-NATO, pro-Ukraine side look to that and say, oh, it's because like Russia has incurred tremendous loss, which is true, they have, without matching that up against what the current Ukrainian defense forces look like. I think it's more so just a partnership that Russia has with the DPRK and reaffirmation of said partnership than anything else. There's a lot of FPV drone footage showing a lot of Asian combatants. I know, but Russian forces also have a lot of minority populations in Russia. There's ethnic Russians that are still Asian. So drone footage doesn't necessarily show that they're definitely North Korean. Not saying that there aren't, by the way. Most of Russia is in Asia. So, like, Asian as in, like, East Asian. Like, dudes who look like they could be North Korean.
Russian someday. But the very idea is an anathema to
You're talking about the indigenous populations like Tuans, Khakas, Buryats, etc. Yes.
everyone else in the room.
There is no betrayal there. There is a recognition that the whole world and the United States is invested and interested in peace, a negotiated peace. As President Trump has said, stopping the killing. And so that will require both sides recognizing things they don't want to. That's why I think the world is fortunate to have President Trump. Only he at this moment could convene the powers that be to bring peace.
But the Europeans fear a Trump-Putin stitch-up, which freezes both them and the Ukrainians out of any peace talks. For the EU's top diplomat, who comes from Estonia, a former Soviet state that fears the same fate as Ukraine, it's existential.
It is clear that
Estonia mentioned. Pog.
any deal behind our backs will not work. Any agreement will need also Ukraine and Europe being part of it, and this is clear that appeasement also always fails. So Ukraine will continue to resist, and Europe will continue to back Ukraine.
Britain, which sometimes hovers between the US and Europe, is clearly in the European camp.
There can be no negotiation about Ukraine without Ukraine, and Ukraine's voice must be at the heart of any talks.
Some might recall a meeting exactly 80 years ago when the Soviet, British and American leaders, Stalin, Churchill and Roosevelt, met at Yalta in Crimea to carve up the world after World War II. War-ravaged occupied countries had no...
What's your favorite Houthi musical? What's your favorite bar from a Houthi musical? Play a Houthi musical for chat. It would probably be that. It would probably be the one that I showed Nick, where they were talking about how the American-backed Saudi coalition forces were doing a genocide in Yemen. And they were saying, "Send us more weapons if you want. We will never stand down." That one probably is my favorite. Yeah. Yeah, they got diss tracks for days. I don't know why people think that this is like a massive own or something, especially considering that this is like not a issue to be hosted on any other platform, with the exception of Twitch's own terms of service being way more rigid than all these other platforms. You know? This is not a defense of the Ansar Allah movement's banner or their domestic affairs, but yeah, if you genuinely want to know, I think that the one where they were fighting against the Saudi blockade and the famine and said, "You can keep killing our people, it doesn't matter," that one was a pretty good one. You've been cutting your oil with whiskey? Oh, for Saudi Arabia? If chatter is wondering, the name translates to "We Don't Care." Yeah, that's the title of that one, that musical work. It came off like he's saying you're a fake fan. Name 3 Houthi songs. Yeah. You're not a real leftist if you don't mask every day. Okay. Don't know why you're bringing that up right now. I'm in my own house. Let's continue.
Say the great powers decided everything. Might was right. And that's how the new US administration sees it too.
We can talk all we want about values. Values are important. But you can't shoot values. You can't shoot flags, and you can't shoot strong speeches.
Wow, bold.
There is no replacement for hard power.
That's he's really spitting.
Ukrainian soldiers on the front line aren't thinking about history. For them, it's about personal survival and the survival of their country. Because if Ukraine is sacrificed to Russia, what was the point? Why did their comrades die? The atrocities Russian soldiers committed in...
It's a great question. I agree. A question that I have wondered quite a bit myself.
Bucha, will they be not punished but rewarded for them? Ukrainian cities are still being bombarded. They desperately need peace, as President Trump says, but not at the cost of losing their independence or reaching a temporary peace, only for Russia to come back for more in a few years' time. The NATO family photo, but the family is divided. Europe, the Americans have made clear, has to increase military spending, and they can defend Ukraine if they like. America isn't going to. The post-World War II order is over. Get used to it.
Even the Red Army used soft power to fight the nationalists in China by promising things and giving things to peasants. Yeah, I mean, it was fairly easy considering that the KMT's vision for a new China was to reassert and reinstall the previous landlordship dominance over the peasant class, whereas for the Red Army, it was a complete restructuring of said hierarchy. So, you know, even the peasants that worked alongside the KMT initially or filled the ranks of the KMT initially were like, okay, well, I don't want a fucking landlord. I'm going to go with the other guys. So, yeah, I don't even know if that's soft power at that point versus a genuine commitment to instilling change. Chiang Kai-shek was anti-landlord? Maybe initially. No, I mean, there is truth to the KMT's initial formation looking somewhat similar to, well, I mean, I wouldn't say similar to communism or anything like that, but like, yeah, at first, the nationalist movement was also a movement of change, moving away from colonial domination and reasserting. Remember, nationalist movements at this time, at this period, especially if they were colonial subjects, were liberatory movements. So the attitude presented, or even the initial reception, is going to be different. Anyway.
Lindsay Hilson reporting there. Well,
thank you for voting for Trump. We needed change. Yeah, dude. I'm sure you think I voted for Donald Trump. Come on.
He seems to deliver another
Sean the Black. Thank you for the raid. Hope you had a good stream.
Bombshell from the Trump White House. Let's get more from our Washington correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan.
There were no bombshell.
Houthi banner being an issue is literally diluted Western moral panic. Palestinians and Yemenis living under occupation, genocide can't be anti-Semitic to Israelis. Maybe only the other Jewish Palestinians and Yemenis, but not to their oppressors. Like slaves can't be racist to slave owners. I think regardless of the ways in which I think Norm Finkelstein has a really good take on this, and I stand by his analysis on the issue. But it still doesn't change the banner being a curse upon the Jews. You know what I mean? And it's funny to say this because I suspect that they will most likely change it regardless, just like the Hamas charter changed as well. Like, yes, on that side of the world, Jew and Zionism is a substitute for one another because of their experiences with Israel masquerading as a Jewish force and doing this for Judaism. Having said that, considering that the Hamas charter also changed in an effort to be more modern, in an effort to be broadly received as an emancipatory force rather than like a terror cell, which of course that didn't really happen, but I think that will be a similar situation with like the Ansar Allah movement as well. Now, of course, the Ansar Allah movement would have probably had an easier time talking about normalized relations with the Western world in the initial steps of the Biden administration as Biden moved to take them off the terror list, which he did, only to put them back on the terror list when Operation Prosperity Guardian started. You know, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Don't know why we're talking about this, though.
Yet, Matt, but it was interesting last night. Donald Trump in the White House was asked on multiple occasions if his peace talks with Putin would include Ukraine. And I have to say, he was non-committal.
Even if you rewrite the definition of racism like that, it's still prejudiced and wrong. What? No, anyone can be anti-Semitic? Oh my God. I don't disagree with you, chatter. I understand. But you're doing an anti-white racism is real argument right now, which is weird. Like, the fuck? And also, there's never been a moment where I've defended the Ansar Allah banner anyway. That's not the point. I do think it's indefensible. And not just from, like, the Western perspective. But if you want to understand the context in which these sorts of opinions manifest, I will also explain that to you as well. All right, can we just continue with this conversation?
At best. At one point, a journalist pressed him on the matter. Do you view Ukraine, he was asked, as an equal partner in the peace process? The president looked stumped. It was as if he hadn't thought about that question. That's an interesting question, he said after musing for a while. I think they have to make peace, President Trump said. That was not a good war to go into. No sense from President Trump that Ukraine had no choice, that it was attacked by Russia. He was also asked at one point whether or not Ukraine would have to cede territory to make peace. And he said that Zelensky is going to have to do what he's going to have to do. And then at one point he said, yeah, I think they're going to get some of the land back. I think they will. Well, I was up on the Hill earlier trying to gauge reaction from senators as to the developments. As you could imagine, the Democrats are furious while the Republicans were torn between trying to be supportive of Ukraine and trying to be deferential to President Trump. Let's hear what some of them had to say. Is America betraying Ukraine?
President Trump, not America. Please make some distinction between the two. Secretary Hegseth has apparently said in a meeting that the door for Ukraine to be admitted to NATO is closed and that they will not be able to recover their sovereign territory. If you go back and read Donald Trump's Art of the Deal, you don't give up the most important negotiating points before you begin negotiations in earnest. For us to concede those as a country, for the Trump administration to concede those, would be a betrayal of the thousands of Ukrainians who have fought so bravely and died for their country's freedom.
But what about the concessions? Europe is saying, why give up things before you've even started the negotiation? That's a betrayal.
In my conversations with President Trump, he wants Russia to lose, he wants Ukraine to win, and he wants the war to end. So I know he's working hard to make that happen.
So the negotiations will definitely include Ukraine at their heart?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I believe that.
Okay, at what point, like, why would you even believe any of that, by the way? It's like, are the conversations featuring Palestinians and their needs? No. Are the conversations featuring, the conversations never feature the people that are outside of the American, outside of the American allegiances. Okay? They just don't care. I think it's crazy to think that, like, to act like what Trump says and what Trump does are directly in line with one another. I think it's silly to assume that they're going to give a shit about Ukrainians at all and what their actual opinions are or what their actual needs are. It never was the case. And I think that there is some cold hard truths to the way that Trump is operating, as is the case with many of the things that he says when it comes to American foreign policy. Something that I think I will have to repeat over and over and over and over again, as I did the first Trump administration. It's not correct, it's immoral, but it's the truth about American foreign policy. The only difference is it's stripped of the aesthetic reasons. It's stripped of the aesthetic permission structure that it creates for liberals. That's it. The greatest example that I use to this day is when Donald Trump turns around, when Donald Trump famously turned around and said, yeah, of course we're going to keep giving billions of dollars of weapons to Saudi Arabia. Who's going to buy the weapons? Do you have $1 billion? Of course I'm going to keep giving Saudi Arabia weapons. At the time, Saudi Arabia was doing a genocide in Yemen. Many of you probably didn't know that, but or at least the Hasanabi heads in here that have been around for a while were familiar with this. That is the position of the American State Department. The only difference is there's no need to shelter the American public from the truth. He's just openly stating what it is, what is the case.
That Ukraine can win, that it can push back to regain territory, but
the message yesterday was, you don't have the United States.
The message yesterday was weak and pathetic, kowtowing to Putin, bowing and scraping. President Trump seems to be an admirer of Vladimir Putin, which is a nice way to put it.
Is America still supporting Ukraine?
Senator Van Hollen, be glad to answer your questions.
Do you support Ukraine still?
I do.
Well, I certainly do. I'm very worried about what happened.
We both do.
Does America support Ukraine still?
I've said it was a mistake from the beginning to send $200 billion to Ukraine. I'm still opposed to sending more aid to Ukraine.
Well,
he's like, I've never been a supporter of the Ukraine. Why are you asking me that?
Last thing, President Trump reiterated that he does plan to meet Putin in Saudi Arabia. He said that Putin would also come here to Washington, D.C., and that he would go there to Moscow. He was asked at one point whether or not he would meet Zelensky in...
I think my most controversial opinion on this is that not dissimilar to what I've said about the Biden administration, knowing full well that the Trump administration was going to take the reins, or even the danger of the Trump administration coming back into power, the Biden camp should have packed all of this shit up. They should have packed it up in their own vision if they chose to do so, whether it be with Israel or whether it be with the Obama administration the first time around, ensuring that they put a Supreme Court appointment up there, no matter what the cost, considering that there was a likelihood that Trump might actually win and then do whatever he wants with the Supreme Court. Major mistake from the Democratic Party. Major issue with oversight. So even if you're a Dem, even if you're a NatSec Dem, okay, I certainly am not. But let's say there are some national security Democrats out there, okay? There's plenty of pro-NATO Democrats out there. There's plenty of NatSec Dems out there, okay? How do you look at this? How do you look at the situation and think, well, the Biden administration probably should have packed all of this stuff up to ensure that the Trump administration couldn't come in and actually seize the reins of power and deal with it in the way that they want to. Okay? That's it. Same with Ukraine, same with Gaza. Especially with Gaza, because there is a lot more power and influence that we have over Israel, as opposed to power and influence that we have over Vladimir Putin, okay? A foreign adversary with his own needs, own material needs, and violent ambitions. That's it. That's my statement. So if you're here upset about Donald Trump assuming the role of assuming control over all of this foreign policy initiatives, remember that this only happened as a direct consequence of the Biden camp not actually doing what was necessary at the time, when they had 3 years to change the dynamic, whether it be offering more weapons faster or directly meeting Russia and coming to the table and trying to facilitate some kind of ceasefire negotiation. Whether you believe that Russia will keep up their end of the bargain or not does not matter, because instead you just had no ceasefire and all war. Putin is going to reject the deal? I doubt it. I think that he has also incurred significant penalties, significant losses. So it is in his best interest as well to try and pack the situation up and solidify the boundaries of all of the territory that he annexed. I think that one of the biggest oversights in the Biden camp, from my perspective, was consistently saying, "Oh, we're not going to talk to Vladimir Putin. We're just not going to do that." Which was a lie. They did talk to Vladimir Putin. They talked to Russian envoys when there was a hostage negotiation at play. But they never talked to any sort of Russian envoys when it came down to facilitating a ceasefire. I think that was a major oversight from the Democratic Party once again.
In Ukraine, again, he looked puzzled and he said, well, I might. He wouldn't commit to that. Matt.
Siobhan, you're all over those corridors of power in Washington. Thanks very much indeed. Let's go to Chris in London.
Well, joining me now is Timothy Milovanov, Ukraine's former economy minister and president of the Kyiv School of Economics.
That could have happened only before the elections and maybe even before Brandon dropped out. No, that's what I'm saying. That's precisely what I'm saying. That is what I mean. Yes, that's why I said there were 3 years where the Biden camp could have actually... You know what's ironic? If the Biden camp actually went in and said, no, we got to talk to the Russians, I suspect that the statement, the attitude from Fox News and the Republican right would most likely be, fuck these guys. They're doing Obama-style apologia tour for an enemy of America. Regardless of what Trump's rhetoric around this issue has been. Except, they didn't do that anyway, so here we are. Anyway, this is still coulda, woulda, shouldas, and there's a lot of that, but it doesn't matter. So why do the Dems need to be nice? What do you mean? Need to be nice? I'm simply stating that if the Democrats had a different vision for Ukraine and how it should basically end, then they should have implemented it, or at least tried to implement it. I suspect that they don't have that much of a different vision from the Trump cabinet regardless, because American foreign policy is uniparty, and the marginal differences from the Republican administration and the Democratic one is that the Republican administration has a different way, especially with Trump, has a different way of pushing their agenda, and they oftentimes will go further right and become more reactionary and fuck things up even further and get more violent, regardless of what they say they're interested in doing. The only way that any kind of conflict ends is if it's an inevitability due to the conditions of the battlefield. Afghanistan withdrawal is a great example of this as well. Negotiated by Donald Trump, implemented by Joe Biden. Donald Trump turned around and shit all over Joe Biden. Joe Biden pulling out of Afghanistan while following the conditions set forth by the Trump administration. Why did we pull out of Afghanistan? It got to a point where it was just costly for no reason.
Ukraine could say no to whatever Donald Trump agrees with Vladimir Putin?
Well, there are minimal conditions for peace on Ukraine side. One of them is not ceding more territory unoccupied. The second one is some meaningful guarantees, security guarantees, because if those are not there, what is there to negotiate or agree to? Just accept Russian conditions.
Yeah, this is the most Ukrainian man alive, is what someone said in the chat, and I agree. His name is Timofeev.
So something, for Ukraine to sacrifice, to make painful sacrifices, whatever they are. I think it is important that Ukraine gets something back, and Ukraine is an independent country.
So it could say no. I mean, the US Defense Secretary is saying effectively Europe has to be the security guarantor for Ukraine. Now, this just comes a couple of days after President Zelensky said, well, that's just impossible.
Well, yes, indeed. President Zelensky said, and I think that's true, that full security guarantees, real security guarantees, which prevent Russia from invading in a couple of years again, are impossible without the United States being there. Europe can provide, 50, 70, 80% of all, but that's, the US has to be there. Otherwise, the war will restart or likely to restart soon. So, yes, that's correct. And I think we have to bring the US in some form.
Do you think most Ukrainians will see this as a betrayal?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Most people see it as betrayal right now in Ukraine. The U.S. cannot be relied on. And also, President Trump appears to be very weak because he conceded to Russian demands before even getting anything out of it. So it looks like Putin has played President Trump. At least that's how it is seen from Ukraine.
It's also remarkable to hear politicians both in Europe and in Britain comparing this to appeasement.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it is appeasement. Peace through strength. I haven't seen any strengths. No one has seen any strength.
I love when Asmongold supporters come in here and go, how is this guy not banned yet? One, I don't even think Asmongold agrees with you in terms of getting me banned. I would be shocked if he did. But two, what do you mean? What do you want? He's already the largest commentator on the platform, largest political commentator on the platform. You just want, no dissent whatsoever? No dissent? No leftist position to ever be reflected on this platform? Is that your argument? And if you're also not an Asmongold supporter and saying, how is this guy not banned? Then what is your expectation? Do you want Asmongold to be the only voice of politics on this platform? He already has developed quite the audience of right-wingers. What happened? I thought you guys hated cancel culture. Saying you are a leftist is a massive stretch. Who is a real leftist in your estimation? You personally say you hate Democrats. God, I love doing political commentary. The anti-capitalist leftist Democratic Party in the United States of America, as a person who is a critic of the Democratic Party for demanding that they do something, anything really. I myself am, of course, not a real leftist. Real leftists are the pro-Kamala, pro-Biden coalition that is currently doing what? Yelling at their base of support for demanding that they do things. Respect. Pro-Obama, I would say, is a leftist. M. Hud. Andre the Balkan, you are too stupid to navigate this type of conversation. Return to soccer talk and having a T-shaped hairline. American education. His name is Andre the Balkan. I don't think this is a American education, chatter. I have a full head of hair, man. Okay, the fact that he only responded to that means that he definitely has a T-shaped hairline. Respect. You can convert him here. He thinks the Democrats are leftist, dude. Okay, I don't think I can convert him. He thinks Obama is a leftist.
Strengths. People have seen weaknesses only in these negotiations, so to speak, negotiations, quote unquote. So we'll see what tomorrow brings. Maybe it's some kind of very complicated and brilliant strategy to appease Putin in terms of rhetoric, but then in practice provide Ukraine with real security guarantees. I think this will become very clear very soon.
But is there a realistic alternative to accepting whatever Trump negotiates, given how reliant Ukraine is on the United States to wage its war? I mean, could Ukraine go back to war without America?
Well, Ukraine is in war right now, and what the U.S. is offering is basically nothing, or Russia is offering. I'm actually not even convinced that Putin is willing to stop the war, or he's negotiating in any good faith. What is clear, I think, de facto to everyone, and President Zelensky has spoken about it, that getting territory back at this point is not realistic. It has to be done through some other measures in the future. Then NATO, frankly, even under the Biden administration, that has not been on the table. I think here, President Trump and Secretary Haggis, they basically say what they say what the Biden administration has been saying behind the doors, but not publicly. The U.S. doesn't want to see Ukraine in NATO. So on that front, I think it is okay. It's just reality. The real question is, will there be...
what? This guy might be... Wait a minute. This guy might be a Russian operative who loves Vladimir Putin. I can't believe he said that. Wait a minute. This guy, but all of the drama farmers have told me that anyone who says those things is a Vladimir Putin supporter, like Hasanabi Piker, who's the #1 Vladimir Putin supporter of all time. It's interesting that the most Ukrainian man on the planet is also saying the exact same things that Vladimir Putin supporter Hasanabi Piker is saying. Hmm. Why didn't the U.S. want Ukraine to be a part of NATO under Biden or Trump? For the same exact reasons that France and Germany also didn't want it either. They had well, for America it's different, but for European countries, they already had a long-standing energy, they had a long-standing energy partnership with Russia. They understood that this would be a red line that would be enforced by Russia if Ukraine was to be a part of NATO. Like, there is a level for global powers. There is a level of like how much they can enforce their will around the world. Like, there's still obviously some interests of foreign adversaries that they have to abide by. Like, that's it. Minsk agreements? No, that part doesn't really matter. Nobody ever fucking followed through on the Minsk agreements. People are so dumb, man. Why is asking the Ukrainians or the Palestinians what they would want be such a novel idea? That's never a point of consideration. Like, that's never a point of consideration. That's not how empire works.
Military and financial support for Ukraine? Will there be American weapons? And will there be any kind of troops in some form, in whatever form, to prevent Russia from invading in the future?
Exactly. I mean, if Ukraine were to reject a Trump offer of a deal and Trump pulled American weapons, can the war go on from Ukraine's point of view?
Yeah, it will. More people
Trump
will
is live
die.
with Modi, by the way, and we'll get to that after this video is over.
I think Russia will make some gains, but those will be incremental. I don't think there is any chance Russia or Ukraine will make any major movements on the front because the nature of this war with this asymmetric technology, with actually very cheap drones, is that making large advancements are very, very difficult, close to impossible. So I think even at a very low support level from Europe, Ukraine will be able to resist, but Russia will be making advancements.
Mr. Milovanov, thank you very much indeed. Matt.
Well, joining me now is Nina Khrushcheva, a professor for international relations based in New York and the granddaughter of the former Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. It's good to have you back on the program. Do you think Vladimir Putin, given this olive branch from the Trump White House, actually wants to end the war at the moment? Or do you think he's on a roll and wants to continue?
I think actually Putin he can end the war if conditions are fine, and it seems like now they're fine for him. He can end the war. He couldn't end this war if he's not a winner of it. He certainly could not be a loser. But now the winning can be presented because Trump called himself, apparently. We don't know exactly who requested the phone call, but it looks like it is Donald Trump.
She inherited his good looks. She looks exactly like him.
Donald Trump was all complimentary, talking about Putin and himself as we, and then referring to Zelensky and potentially not necessarily very recent.
That is the most Russian-looking house I've ever seen in my entire dang life.
Respecting terms. So yes, I think he wouldn't mind if conditions are right for him. And for now, they do look right, although there is a very long road, as we all understand, from the conversation to the actual ending of this war.
And I mean, the Kremlin today actually, tried to reassure Zelensky that he would be involved in negotiations. And we heard similar sort of reassurances from the White House. Are those reassurances to the Ukrainians and to the Europeans to be believed, do you think?
Well, I think if Zelensky, I imagine, I don't know what exactly they're talking about, but for Putin and Trump, or for Trump and Putin, we don't know who is going to be the first in this scenario. If Zelensky behaves, that's fine. He can be there. But if Ukraine, and actually in your previous pieces on the subject, it does say the West is going to stand with Ukraine for as long as it does. But realistically is if the United States withdraws, there is absolutely very little possibility that the war continues. Yes, it's going to be withstanding Russians' offensives, but Russians are going to take more territory. So they would not mind having
Not one picture on the wall, all mirrors. It's funny because it's like it's the only instance where there are so many mirrors that it actually has the opposite effect of what mirrors are supposed to do, which is make like the entire room larger, look larger, feel larger. But because there are so many mirrors of various different sizes, it ends up making the room look smaller.
Zelensky, but at the same time, we already heard Keith Kellogg saying that Ukraine needs elections. Is it a step to say that when we get to negotiations, it needs to be something else because Zelensky is too war president? He cannot be president of peace.
So do you think by calling for elections, they're kind of hoping that he would be voted out of office and someone more pliant might come in?
I would imagine, yes. I mean, I don't know what exactly they're thinking, but I would imagine that, if you insist on democracy, why are you not democratic? Why there is no elections? We even hear from Ukraine is that, Ukrainians themselves are now kind of concerned about Zelensky legitimacy, not in ideological way, the way Russians present it, but they themselves. I mean, because the war is not going too well. Zelensky promised that it will, and now it didn't. And, obviously the president will be guilty. So yes, but I'm not sure impliable, but somebody who is realistic, somebody you can have a conversation with, potentially Valery Zaluzhny, the Ukraine ambassador in London.
Right. I mean, the Europeans feel very kind of weakened by this. They feel as if they're the victims in this great power game. But they do have a card, don't they? They could fast forward Ukraine's EU membership, which is something that Vladimir Putin presumably would absolutely hate.
Well, the Russians said they wouldn't mind. I mean, I'm sure they mind it, but they really wouldn't mind because it's better than NATO. Yes, they can fast forward the EU membership, but then again, how realistically the country at war can be admitted into the European Union. So there is some card. But I mean, I have to say the fact that Europeans are so beaten up about the fact that Trump said what he said and the story goes the way it goes, it's kind of shocking to me because clearly they're not thinking, or they're living in la la land. What did they think is going to happen? Trump is going to come in and say, oh, have all the weapons in the world. And they themselves really are not contributing as much as Trump would want or America would want. And then they say, oh, no, but we are with Ukraine. Fine, be with Ukraine then. I mean, that's what Trump is saying. Be with Ukraine. Do it on your own if you're all so brave.
Nina Khrushcheva, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We could be